Assalamualaikum Mufti.
Walaikum salam.
We've seen in this period, we've seen a lot of, almost everyone had to adjust and meet the demands of the ever-changing reality. People had to cope with a lot of these new norms. I believe all of us long for something that is constant and stable. So is change really necessary?
Well, change is part of life, whether we like it or not. I think it's the natural way of renewal. So we things change naturally, and I think if we look very carefully around us in the natural world, and in fact even wafi anfusikum, in ourselves, we will find that we change. Nature in the natural world, everything changes. Things grow. So from a state of something which is small, it becomes bigger, it matures. Even trees, we say, a very mature tree from a very small, from a bud to a plant, and then becomes a tree, and becomes a mature tree, and you see the bugs telling you how many years the tree, the age of the tree, and then eventually it dies, right? And with ourselves as well. I mean, we look at it, or we always, and especially on our birthdays, we think about, wow, it's been how many years now, time flies and so on.
Haven't felt that yet.
You haven't? Yeah. Okay. So you're in the enjoying your phase of life where the number doesn't matter.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. And that will change.
Yeah.
That will change. So change is around us. And, we certainly would like some stability. And I think we can cope better with change to ourselves because it takes place at a very slow pace. Even with the natural world, in the natural world, you look at how things grow and evolve. It all takes time. I did geography, one of my most favorite subjects in secondary school, and I remember this because it's my favorite subject. You look at rivers, and the rivers meandering, right, and then they form certain structures.
Okay.
And those structures are formed, like with all other natural structures, they're formed over sometimes millions of years of water flowing in one direction. So it slowly erodes with erosion and so on and so forth, our oceans and everything. So the natural process of change is it gives that thing enough time for it to slowly change over time. I think one of our challenges today is because of a sudden shock to the way we live, and we are forced to either adapt quickly or we might get into real trouble, right? And COVID is certainly one very, very big example. You have to adapt very quickly. And this is also exactly why you see in some societies, they refuse to change. And you are right. So some people just refuse to change, and they question it, and they give all sorts of excuses. You just look around the world in not just societies, but even some governments refuse to adopt approaches which are new and quite radical, like wearing of mask, because they're not used to it, right? I don't want to change how I look like even in public outside because I'm not comfortable using the mask. So those are the signs of people, humanity struggling with sudden changes, and I think we can understand that. But in terms of trying to find a solution to overcome our challenges, that ability to adapt very quickly is extremely important. That ability to be nimble. So, like when you drive and you find, like, on the road, you find like there is a traffic congestion, an accident or whatever. You have choices, right? You can either just, I'm not bothered to change my route. I stay on this road, and you can do that, but you can get stuck for 10 hours, 12 hours, or how many hours depending on the traffic conditions. But a way to get to your destination faster by overcoming that problem is to find alternatives, to find solutions, and that requires change. and those changes can only happen if you prepare yourself well. So you need information, you need knowledge, you need to see, for example, which roads are available. Of course, Google does a lot of work for you now. Google Maps will tell you the alternative route. But that essentially is about how you overcome particular situations. Yeah.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I mean, change has always been there in a part of our life. Even before COVID, change is there. I guess it's just a bit, less apparent and a bit slower. But when things started to radically change, that's where we question ourselves why all the changes. The thing about that, Mufti, my question is, how best can we change as ourselves individually and maybe as a society as well, as a community? How do we change?
Yeah, I think first of all we must try to individually, right, at a personal level, we must embrace change in general. Change, you look at change. Change can be from something good to something bad, and can be something bad to something good, or can be from something good to something even better, right? So there are various ways of change. We have seen in our lives, even when we look back at ourselves, we will find moments where we slip.
We fluctuate.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite volatile sometimes, right? Ups and downs, so to speak. So I think we need to embrace this idea of change to become better people, to become better in our profession, our knowledge, our contributions in all sorts of things. We need to have that kind of attitude to sort of embrace change. That's very important. The whole idea behind hijrah from Mecca to Medina, that's one. And secondly, though, and this is important, so once we have embraced this attitude to change ourselves, we must be realistic. I think for changes to really be meaningful and changes to be permanent, it has to take its natural course. It has to be organic in that sense. The idea of organicity, it cannot be artificial. So you look at the Prophet ﷺ. He did not give up in Mecca trying to preach to a very small group for 13 years. Faced a lot of struggle. At the end, there was a migration to Medina, hijrah. So that was a big moment of change and shift from a situation of persecution and harm, and even many people were victimized and so on in Mecca, to a situation of strength in Medina. But it took time. Had the Prophet been a person who was very impatient and wanted immediate change, he would have either given up in the very first few days, when Sayyidina Bilal was tortured. Those are the people who followed him, the early people who followed him, the family of Yasir. They were tortured. He would have given up, or he would have quickly opted for something more radical. But he did not. He waited. Only after many years, and he decided that a group of companions could go to Habasha, Ethiopia, or Abyssinia to find or seek refuge with the king, Christian king Najashi or Negus. And then later on he went to Medina. It was planned carefully. So again, with ourselves, individually, I think change is important, but we have to take a sort of an organic approach. We should not be very radical shift, almost an immediate sort of desire. You can see all sorts of things now with weight management, with diet. People want everything so fast and so quick.
Instant.
Everything is instant. We used to cite this example a lot. Like instant noodles and everything. 3 minutes, fast food. Everything is fast. Yeah. But we know everything which is too fast, too quick, there are trade-offs. And in terms of change, they may not last. So remember the 3 companions who one day talked about the Prophet and said, he is so special, his status is so elevated. Who are we? So, but we want to get close to him. We want to try to be as pious as possible. So one said, I'm going to pray all night. I will not sleep. So, aqumul layl wala anam. I'm going to stay up all night, pray to God. So I will every night in prayer, I don't sleep. Second says, I'm going to fast. Asumu wala uftir. I'm going to fast every day. I'm not going to have a day without breaking my fast. And the other said, I'm going to remain celibate. I don't want to marry because marriage will distract me from worship. I'm not going to marry anyone. And the Prophet found out and said, I am the closest to God amongst all of you. Usalli wa ana. I pray, but I also sleep. And then I fast, but I also have days that I don't fast. And atazawajun nisa, I am married, right? Faman raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. This is my sunnah of moderation. So pushing ourselves to the extreme in embracing change or expecting instantaneous results, immediate change, is against the natural order of things. Like I said earlier in the podcast, we talked about nature gives us a very powerful sign and lesson in the way changes happen. It takes place over time, and those changes become very powerful. The way our environment has adapted is because of million years of how the things have evolved. The plant worlds and the animal world and so on and so forth. So things take time. Changes need time. Same way with ourselves. I think yes, we need to embrace that attitude of change, but it takes time and it takes a lot of determination.
Yeah, that's really a lot to take in. I mean, changes accordance to or in respectful of the order of creation accordance to the circumstances and all, not just to instantly or radically change immediately. I think that's really based upon it's a deep-rooted desire to just maybe it's maybe based on fear or anxiety probably. The thing about change, Mufti, when we want to change, some find it easier than others. Why is it for some it's really easy for them to possibly change, and for some others it's really hard for them to embrace these changes? What are some of the things that we need to bear in mind when embracing changes in life?
Yeah, like I think it goes back to the idea which you mentioned earlier about some people are just comfortable with very stable things, right? They wouldn't want change is disruptive. Right? Change is very disruptive, and we are a lot more comfortable with things which are quite routine, very set, very stable. I want to go to the same coffee shop every morning, have my same set of breakfast. One morning you say that sorry, this is closed, and you get very upset. I want to take the same mode of transport. So today I drive, and tomorrow I lose my car. I can't survive. I can't cope. A lot of people say those things, and you're right. So some people do find it difficult. I think it goes back. It must go back to the idea that, and we are taught this in our religion, that nothing is permanent. The order of things that we see is never permanent. At the in an instant, our circumstances may change. So we need to tell ourselves that, and by really understanding the way things work and the way things can be, at least we are better prepared to adapt ourselves, to change ourselves. And the other thing, is whether we have enough will in ourselves to become better. One of my favorite verses in terms of change is in Surah Fussilat. Wala tastawil hasanatu wala sayyi'ah. So good and bad are not the same, which means that if you see something bad, you want to change it to make it better. And then Allah says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. So repel the bad thing. In other words, change it to become better. Billati hiya ahsan, with something which is better. And the outcome of that, and this is where we talk about even social changes in society, social change. The outcome of that, if you find, and we will find a lot of this in society, in our lives, things which are not good. As a good person, you want to change it to become better. But when you choose the best way, the better way, ahsan, right? Some can interpret this as better, some interpret it as best. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. Because you chose the right approach, and you're very patient, you are very determined on that, you will find that those who had enmity in them towards you, they become your closest ally, your closest friend.
Wow.
So, you change people. You change people's minds and people's heart. And that is the business of real change that the Quran speaks about. And we know that is very, very tough. And true enough, Allah then says in the next verse, وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. People cannot get it. Only those who are
patient
get it. What does patience mean? It means you have to wait. It means you have to give it time. It means you have to keep working and trying, not to just, tomorrow I do something, I demand change to happen. So we have to be persistent. We have to be very organized. We have to be very persistent. We have to be patient. We have to not give up in the first sight of failure, for example. Keep trying. I remember a story told by my teacher once about, not giving up. There was this professor who was relating the story of his PhD journey. He said he has been trying for many years, writing his thesis, but he felt like giving up because he tried and it just didn't work. So he was on the verge of giving up until one day he was in a train or a bus, he said. So he was sat there and he saw a bug. I don't know whether it was a cockroach. Now, I'm a bit like, I don't like cockroaches, so I don't want to imagine a cockroach. Maybe a bug, a bug. Was trying to crawl up the wall of the train. Tried and failed, but kept trying. Eventually the bug reached wherever maybe a ledge that he wanted to go to. And he said, if that bug can do it, then I can do it too.
Wow, that small moment inspired him to continue.
Yes, and not give up. So change is like that, especially in society, especially on social issues, because social issues involve a lot of people. The more people you involve, the more difficult, the more complex it is. It's never an easy solution. And therefore we have to keep trying. We have to organize ourselves, but we also cannot be expecting immediate results. We have to, keep on, our persistence and perseverance on the matter and trying our best. And this is exactly, I think, what it means. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. Same way that we deal with our children. Sometimes you have challenges with our kids. My son is a teenage child. I know the kind of challenges. If you're not happy with something, you think that you can change it overnight. I don't think so. You have. If you are and if you're able to, you're a very lucky person. But if you're not, then you are a normal person, and we all are. I like to think that we all are very normal in that sense, and we have to plan. We have to keep trying, and it's a long process. It's a long-term process, long-term goal, and that's where we should be, and that's how we should approach it.
One last question, Mufti. When we want to change for ourselves to be better in life. There are actually a lot of things that we need to factor in, because eventually when we live in a society and we might affect others. So what are the things that we need to take into account for to proceed with the changes that we plan ahead towards to?
I think there are certain changes that will affect other people. There are changes that might be very private to you. It may not affect other people, but there might be which may affect other people. And I think it's good to first ask ourselves who might be implicated by this change, right? And as a responsible person, whatever change that you want for yourself, you have to, I think, discuss with the people that will be affected by it. And consider their views, and especially if you're a married person with a family, you sometimes want to do certain new things. I think it's important that you discuss, and get their views and see how they could also support you in a change. As long as that change is for the better, I think people will generally want to give their support. If I may look at my experience, when I had some kind of health / mental health scare, and I decided to change my diet because I was, of course, getting older, and I thought, maybe it's time to really go radical on your diets and look at what you eat and so on. You cannot change if you're a married person with a family. You can't change your diet without getting your wife involved or your, whoever is living with you involved. You can't just tomorrow come and say, I'm not eating all that. You can cook whatever you want. I'm not eating that food. I'm eating my own food. You cannot do that because that's irresponsible, because I think that the issue of selfishness, you only think for yourself, but you now live with a family. Same thing with if you're at work and, some changes for you, which may affect your colleagues. I think you need to have those conversations. But most people, and in most cases, if the change is for the better, like in this case, I wanted to change to a healthier diet. My wife was fully supportive, and she was on board, and she supported it. So as a family, we then adopted it. And that, to me, is even a stronger outcome than you just doing it on your own. So it's in the same way that, any other change, I think you must consider, how it affects other people, get them involved. Like I said, if it's a positive change, they would be very supportive of it. There are examples of changes where, it affects other people and you don't consider their views or how it affects them. It often ends up ugly because, it causes a lot of misunderstanding. It causes relationships to break down. People struggle. I've heard of people who suddenly become, very spiritual or very religious, and they actually don't talk about it with their families. So the families start to wonder what's going on. Yeah, and is he or she all right? And then he or she's no longer talking to us that much. Just always on the prayer mat and doing zikir or prayer. But at the same time that you think that's a positive step, it begins to affect your relationship with the family, and that's not good as well. So if you want to become a better person through prayers and so on, I think if your family understands that, they will be supportive. So all we need to do is to speak with them, because you are part of that family. Remember that, and so I think whatever change we want to do, we have to be responsible in the way we carry out those changes as well. So to speak with people, to communicate with those who are affected, to get their views on it, and then we move together. At the end of the day, if it's for the good purpose, people will be able to support it and will join you in that journey towards a positive change.
That's a really important note for us to end our conversation in this episode, to be responsible amidst all these changes. And if you want to change for the better, change is something that is a part of our life, and it's always been there. The thing is how do we embrace that change? And I guess the Prophet ﷺ, as mentioned by you, Mufti, encourages us to have a sense of moderation in our changes for the better, and also to be responsible as well. It's one of the challenges for me in this podcast is to actually summarize all the many points that I've learned in each and every episode. I hope for the listeners out there, if you find any points that are beneficial for you, do tag us on at Muslim.Sg on Instagram, and inshallah we'll see you again on the next episode. Until then, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.